Uhuru, and welcome to the study 2021 African Revolution and Reparations with Chairman Omali Yeshitela, hosted by the African People's Solidarity Committee. My name is Ali Ayello, and I am a member of the National Central Committee of the African People's Solidarity Committee, which works directly under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And before we get started today, if you are tuning in on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe to get alerts whenever we go live or post a new video. And if you are tuning in on Facebook, please share this live stream with friends. Let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. We will have a Q&A later in the program, so take notes and enter your questions in the comments section on YouTube or Facebook or in the Q&A feature for those of us who are in the Zoom room with us today. So in today's study, we will be summing up 2020 and looking ahead to 2021 as the African People's Socialist Party continues to lead and build the worldwide African Revolution, and the role that we have as white people to continue building the movement for reparations from our communities. The African People's Solidarity Committee's mandate is to organize other white people to build the movement of reparations and genuine solidarity with the liberation of African people. And I want to start this off by saluting our incredible leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who developed the political theory of African internationalism and who represents the leadership of the African Revolution around the world, and who we are so honored to have in tonight's program today. So welcome, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And I also want to take this opportunity to salute Deputy Chair Onazine Yeshitela, who has put on the ground Chairman Omali Yeshitela's vision of the Black Power Blueprint and who leads the more than 50 economic institutions of the party. I also want to salute and welcome to today's study the Chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Penny Hess. Chairwoman Penny was present when the African People's Socialist Party held the founding conference of the Solidarity Committee in the fall of 1976 and has been a cadre member of the African People's Solidarity Committee ever since. In 2001, she published a groundbreaking book, Overturning the Culture of Violence, which under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela detailed the complicity and participation of white people in the historical assaults and colonial violence against African and other oppressed peoples. And a few more words about Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Chairman Omali Yeshitela is the founder of the African People's Socialist Party and the African Socialist International. Chairman Omali is the acknowledged leader of the African nation. He has led the world in defining what the African nation is, a nation that will be consolidated by the victory of the worldwide African Revolution. Chairman Omali has given the world the science of African internationalism that proves that it was the assault on Africa, the sale of African human beings, and the colonial theft of African labor, resources, land, and genius that built the wealth and power of the capitalist system and the pedestal on which all white people sit. Chairman Omali Yeshitela has built on the ground organization led by the African working class around the world and created the African People's Solidarity Committee in 1976 to send white people behind enemy lines as the voice of Black power in whiteface. So right now, I would like to welcome to this event Chairman Omali Yeshitela to this event in discussion with Chairwoman Penny Hess. So Uhuru, Chairwoman Penny, and Uhuru, Chairman Omali Yeshitela.
Uhuru, thank you, Ali. And I want to welcome everybody here tonight. I'm so honored to be able to be here with Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Welcome, Chairman. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Comrade.
And I just want to start by joining the salute to you, the leader of the African nation, and to Deputy Chair Onazine Yeshitela and all of the incredible leaders of the National Central Committee and the regions all over the world of the African People's Socialist Party. It's such an honor to be a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of white people under the leadership of the African Revolution, deployed into the belly of the beast to win reparations, returning the stolen resources to African people. So, you know, I just want to say before we start our discussion, Chairman, and I want to speak to white people that are listening, that as the African People's Solidarity Committee under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, it is our job, it is part of our job to fight for the war of ideas, to win white people to become African internationalists, to be able to begin to see and perceive and understand the world as it really is, and not as we want it to be, and not just as a consumer of information, but as a true African internationalist, which, as you say, is a theory of practice. So it's not something that's abstract, or that we cannot abstract it into the walls of academia or something else. It has to be an understanding of the world that propels us into action in an organized way as part of the strategy for the African Revolution. And, you know, Chairman, this has been an incredible year with so much that has happened. There's so much to talk to you about. Many white people have been awakened by the resistance of the African working class following the police murder of George Floyd in May, but it's been the analysis and practice of the African People's Socialist Party since 1972, and your leadership, which formed the African People's Solidarity Committee more than 44 years ago, that informs this period today, and I'm really excited to talk to you about that. And Chairman, if I may, just before I begin talking to you, I want to say that, you know, I want to make the appeal, the call to white people, because we have to have a worldview, an ideology of the African working class. There are only two sides to an understanding of this world, and that is white power, imperialism, capitalism, and the oppressed and colonized of the world, led by the African working class. And the fact that capitalism was built, as Chairman Omali Yeshitela has told us and proven scientifically, it was built on the assault on Africa, the kidnapping and sale of African human beings that created this massive wealth, the stolen labor of African people, the stolen resources of Africa, and the genius of African people, along with the genocide and colonial domination of the majority of the people on the planet Earth. That's how capitalism was born and is maintained. And that is not a small thing. That doesn't just go away because we change our thoughts, or we're sorry, or we want to do something for African people. We want to do a favor once and then it's all over. That, as the chairman has shown us, this reality of what the chairman has labeled correctly as parasitic capitalism is the dominant fact, the main contradiction of the past 600 years. And African people create, as the chairman has said, and recreate real life for us, not for themselves. And this is such a deep thing that it doesn't even really go away, this reality and the inheritance of it, so to speak, doesn't even go away after African liberation. That this is something that the African Revolution will have to continue to fight and overturn the effects of this for a long time, because this has been such a deep thing. And there are many ramifications of this that we must understand, and we must understand this as the main contradiction in the world today. So, Chairman, so I wanted to start with asking you about the significance of the party's formation of the African People's Solidarity Committee 44 years ago, and especially in this period of struggle, that the African People's Socialist Party finds itself in. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Comrade Penny. First of all, I just like to say I do appreciate being able to participate in this discussion with you. I listened, I was struck by something you said early on leading into this discussion about how many white people, the North Americans, the colonizer, people from the colonizer nation, were awakened by the African resistance, and which was extraordinary. It was this African resistance immediately following the murder of George Floyd, May 25th. But we've seen this before. More recently, we saw that certain development even in places like St. Louis, which, in addition to being notorious for the rich African culture and resistance, the whole history, I mean, it's incredible. In addition to that, of course, the brutality of the murder, the centrality of much of the murder that the United States initiated throughout the current borders of this country, a murder of Africans, murder of the indigenous peoples whose lands were with an acceleration even of the theft of the land of the indigenous people. So we see this in St. Louis. We saw right after Mike Brown and the resistance there. That's when we saw white people who came out. I'm not just talking about the whole array of opportunists who were parachuted into Ferguson, St. Louis, but I'm talking about even some college students and other white people who lived there. It took this resistance, this rebellion. Then they came out, and I think that the 6 years ago, that critical movement has probably been overshadowed by what's happened in the recent past, and especially since May 25th. But the truth is that it was what reignited the African liberation movement in this country, and it was something that played a role in awakening a lot of white people too to something. And I feel like it's so ironic that many of the white liberals that we know, and many of the African liberals who we know, have hesitated to push for genuine liberation of African people, who said that the only thing that we can do is register people to vote, etc., because anything more than that was just too extraordinary, too outlandish, too what they call left and extreme for ordinary people, white people in particular, but others as well. But the truth is that since May 25th through much of August, there were more than 10,000 protests, rebellions, uprisings throughout this country, and white people were involved in that too. And the thing is that white people can't be involved in intensive resistance unless it happens. And this is the thing that shakes the foundation of the entire system, and it pushes to the surface every contradiction that's there. It's the Africa question. It is central to everything, to every question, and which is why I was involved in a discussion today about Trump and the death penalty. He just used the death penalty last Thursday to execute this brother Bernard, and there's much discussion around the fact that he broke a 135-year tradition of presidents never executing anybody, when they're lame ducks, and that kind of thing. But this is America, and it has always. It's not just the death penalty. The death penalty is something that Biden played such a major role in contributing to. I mean, Biden created 60 new categories for which the death penalty would be applied under federal law. And that's been something that's happened. All of them have supported that. I say all of them. I mean, Clinton and Obama and the whole array of forces. And the reason that is true is because of the nature of the system itself and the foundation of the whole capitalist system is the oppression of African people. And in every instance when the crisis emerges, the need to oppress African people and indigenous people here is something that grows greater urgency. And since the 1960s, that's when you begin to see this escalation of imprisonment of African people and this whole so-called war on crime. All kinds of forces were involved in that, from Nixon, you name it, all the way up. And because the white people become frightened, and they become frightened not because of crime, because Black Power was not a crime, and that's 1960s, and Black Panthers, that's not SWAT teams, and all of these interesting kinds of instruments and institutions were created to crush the African liberation movement. And a public policy, this is when you see the emergence of a public policy of police containment, in this country, certainly the deepening of that public policy. So white people were mobilized because it's the critical question. The question of the oppression of African people always has been. And the thing is that we're in a period now, we're speaking about the significance of the founding of the African People's Solidarity Committee. I mean, this is something that happened when, 40,
40 years ago.
How many, 40 years ago?
44.
44 years ago. It's still not appreciated by a lot of forces. It's appreciated, I think, more or less by our own movement. And what has happened is that this organization, this African People's Solidarity Committee, when it was created, was seen as this weird phenomenon. It was extraordinary. It was crazy. It couldn't work, as one white communist organization said, because white people would not work against their own interests by working under the leadership of African people. And the other kinds of silliness that came around in that discussion. And there was a time when we were just the minority hanging out, doing our thing, but plowing it, the earth on a regular basis. And now we are the determining factor. We define what revolutionary struggle is in this country and much of the world today. And the African People's Solidarity Committee is a part of that explanation. It takes on so much, and because one of the great confusions is the presence of white people, the colonizer, in terms of how that affects history. And the reality is that it has been the colonizer that's defined find this world and define the relationship that it has with other peoples of the world. It has created the laws. The colony itself is like fundamentally a prison of oppressive circumstances for most of the people in the world living under this white colonial domination. And it happened as a part of the process of the rise of capitalism. Capitalism came into existence through this process. And so it creates a lot of confusion for some people, because every thought that most people have has its origin in this social system, because accompanying social systems absolutely necessarily are the ideas and the ideology, the philosophy, the culture and things like that are born of that. And then, of course, there's the material reality. The fact is that a situation has been created where the very well-being of white people relies on the ability of this system to keep a stranglehold on the oppressed peoples of the world. I mean, it shouldn't be that hard to understand, because we're in a country where in the United States, I mean, where did the white people come from? Where the hell did the white people come from in the United States? I mean, white people are not indigenous to this land, but the indigenous people are in concentration camps, those who survived it. And what I'm mentioning this is because white people can stand on this land and talk about what a wonderful country America is and how it distributes freedom and it represents all of this in the world, but it's on the land of people who have been conquered and almost decimated and living in concentration camps today. This was what was necessary in order to provide the security and well-being of the white people who came here from Europe under horrible circumstances in Europe. This, along with the forced labor of African people. So I'm just saying that we look at a world where this dialectic is such that white people literally at this point require this stranglehold on Africans and other peoples around the world for your well-being. And so this has confused all kinds of things. So white people are wonderful, often think they're doing wonderful things because they will come up and say, well, we need to reform this kind of law that sends people to prison under these circumstances. We need to reform the death penalty. We need to let the poor Black people, have better education and all of this. And when the real contradiction is the social system itself. It's the system that sets up on somebody's land and builds prison for the people upon whose land they've established themselves, and builds prisons for the people whom they've kidnapped from their own homelands and brought and put in these circumstances. This is just the reality that people have come to grow in, and it's not even something that people give a second thought to. I mean, there's sympathy and stuff like that for the poor Black people, for the last person who got killed, for George Floyd having a knee on his neck, etc. But the fact is, white power has had its knee on the necks of the oppressed peoples of the world, and Africans in particular, since its inception. So the APSC was a major blow to the whole ideological assumptions about the relationship that white people should have to Africans and to other peoples around the world. And it also was a response to the reality that white people need to be able to get involved in this struggle. And not as somebody who's so sympathetic and they're here to help the poor Black people, but need to be able to get involved in the struggle because many of them are people who say they hate capitalism, they hate what's happening with the climate, they hate the oppression of women, they hate the exploitation of workers, they hate all of these things. But the foundation for everything they hate is in the oppression of African people. And the ability to have another social system requires white people to join the rest of the world to break free from this ideological stupidity. And it is stupid, and it really corrupts the white population. It just makes it a corrupt and foul and base population that's interested only in its stomach and its own well-being. As long as my child eats, damn the world. Even though my child, the bread my child is eating has come from somebody who's been bombed in Afghanistan or starved in Mississippi or something like that. It turns the population to just a base kind of population, and it's the revolution. It's the African revolution, the energy and the authority and the righteousness of it that gives white people an opportunity to break free of that, because many of them, in some ways, many of you, in some ways, have problems with it, but just don't know where to go with it or do with it. And I've always spoke that, I know for many, many minutes, but I just think this is a really important kind of discussion, and I hope I didn't take you too far off your point.
Not at all. No, Chairman, that was really powerful, and I mean, I think that everybody that's watching is very excited about it. And I mean, I think that this question, first of all, of colonialism that the party has defined, that you have defined, even from before the existence of the African People's Socialist Party, is something I want to talk to you about. I want to, want to go deep into this, because I think that once we understand the definition of colonialism for African people inside the borders of the United States and the science to that, and the actual imperialist infrastructure of the state power that carries out colonialism, and part of that being white people ourselves, that we begin to see how fraudulent, how bogus in every way, and really the greatest hoax and non sequitur is this whole struggle against racism, because it has nothing to do with it. It's like something that it is a non sequitur. It doesn't come out of what the conditions are that African people face. So I just would like you to talk about the question of colonialism and the fact that all white people are the colonizers, and how this has been something that informs the strategy and the work of the party since the very beginning, since prior to the existence of the party, to the junta of militant organizations, which you led. So please, Chairman, talk about this question.
Comrade. Yeah, the question goes back, a bit further than that too, because I think SNCC had begun to talk about this question. Malcolm X had, talked about colonialism. And this was a thing that was really influencing discussions in the 1960s by people who were moving toward revolutionary conclusions. It was in the 1960s. I mean, I was in jail in Clearwater, Florida, I think it was, when I talked to a member of SNCC on the phone. I was either in Clearwater or St. Petersburg, Florida in jail. And they started telling me about this guy, Frantz Fanon, and how he dealing with this whole question of colonialism. Colonialism was something that oppressed peoples around the world were dealing with. This was problematic in so many different ways, because to say that we were colonized, that the whole issue of racism is really important. The question of racism is what we call, it's ideological, a philosophical rather, idealism. And that it is not based in material reality, which is what we have to look at, what's real in the real world. And racism denies people the ability to do that and make the question not the material reality, but our perception about how we feel about things, what we think, how whether we like each other, and that distorts anything that might look like a solution to any kind of practical problem, concrete problem that people have in the world. And so that's one aspect of that. I mean, that happened to African people who lived under in colonial situations, whether it was called a slavery plantation. One of the biggest kinds of things, as we know, that these Cretans who claimed to own African people, who kept us chained and what have you on these plantations, to feed the myth that Africans were so happy to be in captivity and what have you, and really loved it and wanted to be civilized and with the white people, etc. It's just misleading, misdirecting, and what have you. This whole notion of fighting against racism, and then we saw like France. Now, France would refuse to free the African in Algeria because they were determined that the Africans there had to be white too. And they call it French. You had to be a part of France. You're not even, how can you break free from colonial domination? How can you are part of the French, Algeria is a part of France. And this happened, this was even created. The Communist Party was reluctant to support the struggle for Algerian independence, because this whole notion, this does bear a proximity to this whole thing about racism, because we have to be white, we have to be like white people. This is how you were successful in Guinea Bissau, and you saw this in situations where Portuguese colonies, they created a concept of how do they put it? Where persons become like white-like. There's a whole situation where Africans can go through this process. You can be as black as you want to be, but you become more Portuguese than the Portuguese. And there was a category that they created. Emile Cabral, one of the most important revolutionaries of that period, was categorized in that way. So this is just misleading, and it doesn't allow Africans to get a grip on our condition easily, and it creates ideas and perceptions that would have people, white people, the colonizer, ordinary colonizers. I'm not talking about colonialists as such. I'm talking about ordinary colonizers, ordinary white people who are part of the colonial nation. I just make a distinction between the colonizers, part of the colonial nation, and the colonialists. All colonizers are not necessarily colonialists, but all colonizers are close to being colonialists and can be colonialists. That is to say, someone who really advocates and promotes the colonial domination of African people. And there was a point that I was driving at when I first, diverted from it and to go into this distinction about the colonizer and the colonialist. But the thing is that that ordinary white people find themselves becoming colonialists because the resistance of African people is a statement about a subjective thing about white people, that that somehow my wanting to be free is a hatred of you. And the other thing is, of course, whether it's seen as whether it's internalized of that we are not, and almost all the time it has been for years and years. This is what happened in the country, we say, in the United States in particular. It's happening in other places too. I mean, people Fanon wrote so much about it, and other people wrote about it too. So they would trivialize and give the white people this real central place in the world, in your own imagination and in my imagination as well. That you are so significant that all I want to do is be with you, be liked by you, be accepted by you. And if I want you to learn how to like me too. I want you to, learn how to like my music and, et cetera, et cetera. So this is like an anti-racist kind of politic. And it is when you see Africans and other people fighting against colonialism, and then that group of white people who've been seduced into this ridiculous assumption of superiority and inferiority of African people as the basis for the oppression and starvation of African, that group of white people, which is the majority population, is threatened. It's threatened in the real sense because it is true that when the Africans take back our resources, that means that you won't have possession of them. It is true when the Mexicans and other people who are oppressed take their resources, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's not, people don't make a revolution to make white people comfortable, but that's the demand that racism makes, that whatever you do, you can't make white people uncomfortable because that's contributing to their racism, and then we become racist in reverse when we act a way that offends white people. So colonialism talks about dealing with the real world, the material relationship we have. And if Africans don't like white people, it's because white people have been butchers and murderers and thieves and oppressors and things like that, and done it with ease up and down the board. It's without any evidence of remorse at all. I mean, that's why one of the reasons I've had difficulties much of my life. I've never mentioned this aloud with older white people who so friendly, they love me. And I don't know how many lynchings they've participated in. I don't know any of this stuff, but I know that was the norm. I know nigger knocking and lynching was the pastime in this country, up until the 1960s, when you actually saw resistance develop. And then that's the 1960s when you saw the resistance, is when you saw the need to create special organized military forces called SWAT teams. This is the basis for feeding the Nixon administration fight against crime and all of this, because everybody knows crime is synonymous with Black people who just want to be free and want to break out of the social and political and economic strictures that have been imposed on our lives. So the struggle against colonialism can only conclude successfully with African people achieving absolute and total liberation, freedom from the colonizer. And the colonizer, of course, colonialism is the control of a people by a foreign and alien population, state entity. That's colonialism. And you don't get rid of that. Even if white people like me, they're still foreign and alien to the extent they control my resources and the future, of my children, what have you. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. This is really, really profound. And I do think that the only thing that truly mobilizes thousands and even millions of white people is resistance of African working class and the absolute understanding that the that the African Revolution is going to win. The existence of the African People's Socialist Party is going to win.
Well, yeah, perhaps to understand it's going to win. But the thing about that too is that it takes the resistance for African people to thrust ourselves back into history to be a formidable force that the white people cannot deny. So sometimes I can imagine it being possible for some white people not to assume that African people are going to win. But the righteousness of the struggle is something that's made manifest in the fact that people fight, will put their lives on the line, and they'll kill and be killed in the process of winning that freedom. That's the thing that changes so much in terms of the dynamics of this relationship that we have. And so some white people, I'm sure, I mean, look at APSC. People came into APSC without necessarily knowing, as we do now, before having become African internationalists, that we're going to win. But the fact that we were fighting and were put this thing in place gave white people, those who wanted to, that was the only thing that gave them an opportunity to move from this trajectory they had always been on. So what is left for people? Biden? I mean this literally. What is left for people? Biden, Kamala Harris. What is left for people? The Green Party. I mean, the thing is that that people want an alternative to this kind of system, and many people understand that it's only Africans who can bring it. In fact, I'm convinced that many white people voted for Obama precisely because some of them thought that he represented what African people have historically represented, when he changed in a struggle with the existing social system.
Yes, Chairman. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about the question of colonialism, because you have often said that you were born in a time when revolution was the main trend in the world. And of course, that meant anti-colonial revolution. And that this time in the 1950s and 1960s, so much, it was just an explosion of African genius coming from the working class, but even affecting the academic level, or the writers, or all of that kind of thing as well, and the artists and musicians, and and it just was an explosion of just everything African in this time. And you have said that, and pointed out, of course, that colonialism is violence. Colonialism is the state, and that white people have been the state. White people have acted as the state and are the state. And like you just said, the violence that we have perpetrated onto the African population historically is extremely just violent in the deepest way. I don't know if we just lost Chairman, or did the Chairman just come off? But the thing is that I do want to say, if the Chairman isn't on, and if he's coming back on, that this question of colonialism is the key question in the world, as the Chairman is saying, that no other contradiction can change the world. Every other contradiction, hold on, here's the Chairman calling here. Uhuru, Chairman. Okay. Okay. All right, Chairman. Thank you. Okay, he's coming back on. Chairman's coming back on. He just had a little technical glitch in his setup there. So, I just want to say that this question of colonialism is the critical question of today. And that, when we look at what we have done as white people and continue to do, but our whole history, when we look at, well, what are these Proud Boys and all these things, that's just normal. Look back in history. That was always there. And what they represent is the attempt to bring back the blatant colonial domination of African and indigenous people by regular white people. You know, just reading the statistics that that the majority, 80% of the genocide against the indigenous people was carried out by white civilians, not by the US government, although there were the wars of genocide against the indigenous people, which was coordinated militarily and with a staging ground here in St. Louis. So, you know, that was there, but white people were the impetus to that and carried out the Sand Creek Massacre and the slaughter of indigenous people, you know, in California, even, you know, the kidnapping of indigenous children as sex slaves, which was happening during the gold rush in this period. And that the violence against African people, what we have carried out here, for example, in St. Louis, East St. Louis, where it, you know, just brutal slaughter, murder, burning down entire African towns, and the conditions of African people, just inflicting this violence upon them. Tulsa, Oklahoma, which will have its 100-year anniversary of that brutal massacre, aerial bombing, burning down of that city, and they don't even know how many Africans were murdered by white people. That was covered over, and now they're unearthing mass graves of African people. You know, just looking at this reality of our history, which we must come to terms with, that can never be solved by unlearning racism. Because for one thing, all of those things that we have done, and as the chairman said, we still back the state and the 3 strikes you're out and the SWAT teams and everything else, that wouldn't exist if white people, you know, fought against it. And everything that they talked about earlier this year of defunding the police, I don't see that happening. That's not going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen. And, you know, there's no more talk of that right now. White people would not allow that to happen. And that, you know, this whole question of what genuine solidarity is and what it means for us to take a stand of reparations, to take a stand in genuine solidarity with the liberation of African and oppressed peoples, means that, for one thing, we have to recognize what we have been as the colonizers, the incredible violence that we have inflicted on African, the genocide, you know, the terror, the mutilation, the what's called the lynchings, all of this. And as the chairman has said, that we have done this without remorse. We have done this without remorse. I see the chairman is back. And that the only way that we can change, we can be part of change, is under the leadership of the African Revolution. And that is so important. And Chairman, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the question of colonialism and, you know, just how critical that is, how that, as you're saying, defines the world. It defines, it's the material basis for not only the psychology, if you will, of white people, but the ability of white people to have social wealth, to have a prosperous life that is totally tied to the oppression of African people. And as you said, that white people are quite conscious and were from the very beginning coming here very impoverished from Europe to the United States, that stepping on the backs of African indigenous people was their ladder to success. So this question of colonialism, I just wanted you to talk about it a little bit more in terms of, you know, of what it really means. This question that you have raised, that African people produce life and reproduce life, including African babies and human beings for white people. Please talk about that, Chairman.
Yeah, I think that's important. This whole issue of colonialism is much deeper, much more profound than most people understand.
Mhm.
I was reading someone recently who talked about the mediocrity of the colonizers. And the
Mhm.
colonizers are very mediocre, despite the glowing
Yeah.
views they give themselves. The fact is, when you don't have to compete with anybody else, it doesn't do anything to enhance your knowledge base or anything like that. If everybody that's bombed out of existence, jailed out of the situation, can't and can't even contradict you without fear of loss of life and etc. So white people are virtue of being white. Like this is what some people refer to as like white supremacy or something to that effect. But it's a consequence of colonialism, and so you don't have to be smart.
No.
You don't have to, you just got to be white, and that compares with African people, and sometimes people reference Africans' progress and prowess in arts and in music and dance and what have you. And of course, that's quite permissible because colonialism allows us to be entertainers. Colonialism wants to be entertained.
Mhm.
It closes the doors to our ability to feed, clothe, and house and take care of ourselves. It locks that down. It'll kill you. It kills people for trying to do that. It kills Africans. We've seen whole cities bombed and lynched mobs attack African people for anything that approximates trying to take care of ourselves, walk out of the situation. And it happens here. It's very obvious. But Nkrumah was overthrown in Ghana for trying to do something about industrializing that country which was under colonialism, and people are paying prices in Venezuela and every place else. There's competition is not permitted. So it permeates the consciousness of people. And I don't, you look at, white people, I think there must be someplace in a consciousness that recognizes that that you're not indigenous to this land, except part of what has happened too is that history has been changed in such a fashion that 400 or 500 years seems like such a long time. But you look at that's not the blink of an eye. Like in the history of Africa and the history of China and Chinese people and other peoples around the world. So so people act like they can forget how what has happened to the indigenous peoples here and what has happened to African people here. So it's almost like when there is an occasion that the United States is forced or in some way or another internally to talk about the colonial enslavement of African people, it's almost like a rite of passage. It's almost like, this is something we went through a long time ago and the part of the process of becoming this great thing that we either are now on the way of becoming, et cetera. It's not like, it's not like this horrible thing that has been imposed on African people. Colonialism, it affects how the colonizer sees the world. It gives you a very distorted image of yourself because as long as you measure yourself by yourself, you measure your success by itself, and you don't have to compare that with anybody else in the world, where you always are going to be pretty bright and pretty, upstanding. I mean, yeah, you always will be. Uhuru.
Right, and part of our myth, our self-myth, is that we are the reasonable ones. We are the nonviolent ones. That just blows my mind. We're the nonviolent ones. African people and others are violent, but we're not. Just wipe out just this lie that we're brilliant, we're talented, and just the lie, the myth of colonialism, like you're saying, which is a deadly
yeah myth. It's this thing that I hate to say this because sometimes we misunderstand this in our own movement. But you keep hearing that you got to give white people facts and
Yeah.
evidence and data, because white people won't believe it unless. When did white people get like that? They believe everything that anybody's ever said about black people, about Chinese, about everybody else in the world, without any facts, without anything that substantiates it. And the only time white people need facts, as they characterize it, when it goes against the logic and assumption that they have as the colonizer.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so there are all these myths that surround, the reasonableness and
And the scientific.
And this whole thing about can't you lower your voice?
So what? Say that again.
Can't you just lower your voice?
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Yes. Why are you so upset?
Yeah.
Why are you so upset?
Yeah.
And,
of course,
and
there's always the refrain: call 911. Security. This is what.
Yes. Exactly. And the police and exactly. And it's
we're not allowed
all being challenged. Go ahead.
We're not allowed to be angry. We're not allowed to be angry.
That's right.
And you have a traitor like Mandela and Obama, who beloved about white people because they're so reasonable. They're not angry. They're not angry with anybody, etc. And so this becomes the template for how Africans are supposed to be. These guys who on their bellies to imperialist white power, and who serves it, and have served it, in these extraordinary ways. So yeah, these are various myths that get created, and some of it is not myth to the extent that Africans live with terror every day. And I remember, I don't see it that much now because I don't have an opportunity to, but just crossing the street in a downtown area where white people are, and the automatic locking the door. Like I kidnapped them. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm the one who kidnapped them and worked them for nothing. So when I pass by, lock the door because I'm surely a thief or something to that effect. It's yeah.
Yeah, like here in St. Louis, this general, there's a street named after him, General Harney. He was here in St. Louis at a certain point to coordinate the wars of genocide against the indigenous people. He had an enslaved African woman that worked for him, Hannah. That's all we know is her name. And he couldn't find his keys. So he beat her to death. And nothing ever happened to him. Like I said, there's a street named after him here. And the indigenous people called him woman killer. He was known by the indigenous people, but, white people, obviously, it didn't mean anything.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, exactly. So Chairman, I do want to ask you this question of colonialism and the question of reparations as the party defines it, which goes also back to the very beginnings of the African People's Socialist Party, the first tribunal on reparations to African people, which was brilliant and really one of the defining events of the party, in terms of the influence in the world today. And I wanted you to address that, what the party has done around the question of reparations in a very concrete way, making a household word, but also how the party defines it in relationship to parasitic capitalism and colonialism versus how it's seen, generally speaking, by other forces.
Well, the African People's Socialist Party is not the first organization to take up this question of reparations, and even within the lifespan of the party, we're not the first. In the 1960s, even there were people who were doing what they characterized as reparation work. What distinguished us in part was the fact that they were saw the reparations success, or this being realized through going to get in some court to say that that we would do reparations, or getting some form of legislature to say that, and going all the way to a parliamentary body like the United Nations. This is where they saw it coming from. And in the party, we recognized the legitimacy of the demand for reparations, but understood that for reparations to be realized, it had to be something that had been grasped by masses of African people who were victimized, who were the victims of the advent of colonial capitalism. And, and that was the way forward. And so in 1982, just about a year or so after the first Congress of the African People's Socialist Party, we had a tribunal in New York. And this was called World Tribunal on Reparations for African People in the United States. Part of what we're trying to do is we got to take this message beyond, the briefcase toting, persons who received it in that way, and take it to the people. The reparations has become a household word. People need to know about it. And even before that, in 1976, the year of the founding of the African People's Solidarity Committee, when we participated in this 4th of July 1976 mobilization in Philadelphia, where a few thousand people came out against colonialism, even though it was an opportunistically characterized thing. But this effort was made to build some kind of unity across different nationalities and what have you. And the reparations demand was put forth there. And the whites were there, or the whites who loved us in particular, were saying that you can't unite with that because the reparations demand comes from a lunatic fringe. This is lunacy to talk about reparations, so that goes back to '76. So that's like what, 5 years before the actual tribunal that we did, 6 years before the tribunal that we did in New York. So the reparations thing has been something on our agenda for a long time, but we knew that we had to take it out to the masses, let this become a major discussion. And what we did with that first tribunal is that among the things that we were concerned about doing is showing the evidence that, as we say, that crime has been committed. And this was based on international law. We went out of our way to look at international law. And the reason we were doing that is political reasons, because people so embracing law, and the international law is a law that supersedes what is the law of the United States. So we use international law, and we had international judges to hear evidence. And the evidence to prove a crime had been committed, we brought a historian to show the conditions of Africans before Europe attacked Africa and enslaved us. And then, and since then, we had all kinds of testimony from people, not just in historical terms, but what's happening now to Black people as a consequence of all of this. And then we also quantified, which had never been done before, the amount of value stolen just in labor alone. Of course, it was a horribly low estimation, because we didn't understand how to raise the question then as we do now. We didn't understand then that what we were talking about is the origin of the whole capitalist system, so that everything that came from that system, you can characterize in many ways as reparations. So that was the first time the reparations had been quantified. And we did that then. And then for several years after that, 11 years or so, we annually had these reparations tribunals in various states throughout the United States, again, to take the question out there, to let people who in the communities who were experiencing the genocide, obviously experiencing colonial terror, being victimized in certain ways, they could testify too, to contribute to deepening the issue of reparations. And we initiated campaigns, mobilizations, demonstrations, every time something happened, and wherever we were located, and that killed somebody or harmed somebody, we would protest demanding reparations to the victims. We just pushed it on in every way it could be raised. We raised the reparations question. I travel throughout Europe with the reparations message. I met with the leadership of the Irish Republican Socialist Party in 1983, I think it was, in Belfast. And they united with our demand for reparations formally. And they had a press conference there in Belfast that was attended by much media sitting next to me, and to indicate that the Irish Republican Socialist Party was uniting with our demand for reparations. And they made the further statement that any Irish who were in the United States who opposed African freedom and opposed the reparations demand, they didn't want any money from those people. So that was a really powerful statement, and that was a thing. And I went to France, and we attended the first seating of a Green Party in Germany. We were there, because we were going every place we could to push the reparations issue and to win it among as many forces as possible. And I think we were pretty successful in making that happen, bringing it to life and taking it out as an issue that African people and other in various areas were able to deal with and grapple with and agree with. Yeah.
Well, the whole question of the party's relationship to reparations and making it a household word, which was one of the goals of the party, that is clearly, carried out. And I mean, this is like the term colonialism. The question of reparations is really out there now. And now, like you have said, it has to be brought to the source. To the source and to the understanding of reparations. It's not a favor. It's not a one-time payout or something like that. It is a revolutionary demand of the return of the stolen wealth that belongs to that.
More on the people than the Congress or the legislature. And that's one of the things that has happened, like with the African People's Solidarity Committee. There's some discussion about getting Biden in his first 100 days to make some kind of down payment on reparation to African people. I think that's happening in various quarters. And then there's the HR 40, the House Representative Resolution 40. Is it Resolution Bill 40? That's out there for, 30 years or more, where the Congress would vote to, and I think did vote to do a study on whether reparations were applicable to African people. That was in 2001, I think it was, at the Durban conference. Was that 2001?
Yeah.
Where people, thousands of people went to South Africa, Durban, South Africa. And the United Nations had been won to holding that conference there in Durban, and the declaration was that slavery was a crime against humanity, and that reparations would do to African people. And so all of this came about, and the people who played the biggest role in pushing the Durban conference, and we were there, by the way, were people who were influenced in the 1980s when we were first doing the reparations work to build the tribunal. So we played a major role. And the thing, of course, is over years, I was talking to you about this earlier, Comrade Penny, that people run into stuff and they don't know where it came from. They don't know its source, even when they're talking about reparations. And that's one of the reasons we've talked about having to publish the materials that we've done on this question, because it goes beyond than anything that's been talked about around reparations today. And we've seen the reparations demand is not just something, okay, we say reparations, now wait till the government does something. We call on the colonizers to play a role in this thing as well. This is, we say, you say you hate capitalism, you hate the system. In many instances, they hate capitalism. Sometimes it's not they hate capitalism, they just don't like what's happening. But we call on the colonizer, that you can participate in the struggle for reparations. You can participate for the first time in your life. We will give you an opportunity to make genuine class struggle, because we say the whole system, the capitalist system, sits on a foundation of colonial domination of Africa and other peoples around the world, and which has been so hard for white people to get into a struggle against its own ruling class, because it benefits from the colonial consequences. It benefits from colonialism, let's say the working class. And what we're saying is now the working, ordinary white people can engage in class struggle with their enemy by uniting with the pedestal, with the colony, where the class question is really concentrated in the real world. That's what's so significant about APSC and the work that you do. It offers white people this opportunity. And I think some white people really get this. I really have seen that there are white people who want to join this because they know that it's under the leadership of African people. They know that it adds another element of gravity to it, as opposed to just the stuff they run out and do on a regular basis, Black Lives Matter, et cetera. They can distinguish this difference. And I think that's why a lot of North Americans have joined us, in this process.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I mean, just how that this period that we live in, as you defined as the crisis of imperialism, the uneasy equilibrium between the past and the future, it's so critical that the African People's Solidarity Committee exists. It is absolutely critical, and that the leadership of the party is growing all around the world. And I wanted you to talk about, first of all, how you see the significance of this year as perhaps a very revolutionary turning point of many years, over 50 years of, or nearly 50 years of party leadership, and what you see, first of all, for how you understand this year, 2020, and going into 2021.
I think what's really important is to understand, as we do, that our struggle is a protracted struggle. And many people have been awakened to colonial capitalist contradictions and some horrible act or acts, wars and stuff that the United States government is involved in or responsible for. And they rise up, which is right on, and they want to do something. But many people can't stay long because they don't understand the protracted nature of the struggle, and because they may even get some kind of response to some incident that they're talking about. I mean, they may get a body camera as they're demanding, or something to that effect. But it's a protracted struggle that we're engaged in. And this struggle against colonialism, it just reveals itself in so many different ways. Everything that we're talking about is a colonialism. The US is fighting to try and maintain colonial domination of the peoples of the world and things like that. So that's part of what it is that we're looking at. And the fact that the party has been here all this time means that we've been able to see how contradictions evolve, change, how this parasite even changes its shape from time to time, and so, but it's still there. And this is the thing that we're having to deal with all the time. And so the party is, in many ways, we represent something like 50 years of history of the movement. So it's a continuum, a protracted struggle that we've been involved in all this time. And if you go back, you mentioned earlier something that I wrote in 1980. And you go back even before that, you will see how what we were talking about then is being represented in a certain way right now in the world today, because it's still colonial capitalism. It goes through various kinds of crises from time to time. And what happens is that these crises seem to roll over one into the other. In one moment, it looks like, okay, it weathered this. You know, you used to hear all the time about how a certain kind of flexibility that capitalism seems to have at times when it looks like it was on the way out, and then it seems to reinvent itself and happen again. But the fact is that if you got a system, and this is something that most of the so-called Marxists and communists, I say so-called, don't understand, because the system sits on colonialism. They can't answer the question of how this thing got here. You know, and Marx does a very, a poor job at it, because he only defines how it got here as a way to describe European development. You know, he calls it primitive accumulation. He talks about the development of capitalism in the world, and he says it comes through primitive accumulation. And when he said the world, he's talking about in Europe. This is where it comes from. America, this is where capitalism comes, primitive accumulation. And he says that this whole capitalist activity in Europe, that he called it transform European workers into wage slavery. He said it rests on a foundation, a pedestal of slavery, pure and simple. This is the origin of the thing. This is where it came from. And even Marx was blind to that significance, because he came up with this how do you characterize it? He came up with this non sequitur about UK, it's on this pedestal of slavery. And he said, he went more explicitly. He talked about if you get rid of slavery, the whole capitalist system would collapse. The US authority, the dominant thing in the world, would collapse. But he doesn't say that's the way forward. He talks about the way forward being some contest that exists between the working class and the ruling class in Europe. And so they ignore this pedestal that the whole activity of capitalism is occurring on. So this was a serious kind of blind spot, if you will, and of all of those who've tried to grapple with this question. And I know this is, some aspect of theory here, but these are the kinds of questions that we've grappled with for a long time. And over periods of time, you see the crisis comes, and then it seems to go away. And then the Marxists and the so-called socialist economists say, well, it's a crisis born of overproduction, because the capitalist system it produces it produces for the market and not for the needs of the people. So, which means that it is anarchistic. And so, if we need, every car maker makes as many cars as he can, because he wants to sell as many as he can, not even concerned about the fact that there are other car makers making it, except to say that we're going to make ours sharper. We're going to make ours, look better. We're going to make ours faster. We're going to make, this kind of stuff. So after a period of time, everybody who can afford a car has got a car. And this is what they characterize as overproduction, because that leads to crisis. But we're saying that the crisis is not the overproduction. The crisis is the fact that it's production on a base of colonial capitalism, colonialism. And so anytime the colonizers rise up, whether it's in the US or some other places around the world, Africans who on strike in Nigeria, who destroy one of these oil lines and what have you, something like that can affect the price of oil or gasoline in Oakland, California, because this is the nature of the system itself. And so this is the whole thing rests upon colonial foundation. And from time to time, this crisis breaks out and then it recedes, or it seems to go away. And the next time it comes back with even greater authority than it was the last time. And right now we're living in a period where crisis is something that defines everything. You can't think of anything where this crisis is not being reflected. So the social system is troubled, and even thinking represents the ruling class. Remember a while ago, this guy, Fukuyama, I think his name was Francis Fukuyama, wrote this thing about how this was after the Soviet Union imploded or collapsed, and how this was the end of history. That's what he says, the end of history. That the U.S. and what they call liberal democracy, or something to that effect, is as far as humanity can develop.
Wow, I mean, part of what you were just talking about, the myth of the colonizer and all those forms. And I mean, but Chairman, I mean, just these ideas.
Why none of the economists could see what was happening with 2007 and 8. They couldn't see what was happening because they have this myth, when the whole economic so-called depression, not the depression, the Great Recession, they called it. That's what they're calling the repression this time. The depression this time around. It was recession. They couldn't see it because they're looking for numbers and things like that, and not being able to recognize that it's peoples around the world fighting to live. And in order to live, it's absolutely necessary that they fight to destroy these economic and political structures that sucks their life and resources from them into Europe and especially the United States.
Chairman, I mean, it is so exciting to talk about this. It is exhilarating because, it's not just an abstract discussion. This is what is changing the world. This is the understanding of the world that you have led for all of these years, that has turned the world right side up, that has given the analysis that the African working class comes to life, to lead, to be the ruling class of the world, to lead this struggle, the only way it can win. And so, this understanding that if we are African internationalists, then the liberation of African people is I don't know if we can say liberation, but this is our revolution. This is our leadership. This is a world that we can be part of. And yeah, I hate this myth that we've talked about, this fabrication, this lie, this vicious violence of the system, and the lie of it, the myth of it, the self promotion of it, that that forces everybody in the world to play along with or die. I do believe that, millions of white people want to be out of this situation, and that we have to bring this view of the world that is not just an abstract view. It's being played out every single day in a huge dialectically growing seizure of power of the African working class. And I would love, I wish we could talk to you, Chairman, for about 4 more hours, but I do want to ask you about the upcoming, first of all, before I ask you about the upcoming plenary of the African People's Socialist Party, I want to talk to you about the growth of the party throughout the world and what is happening right now, where the ideas are becoming a material force among the African working class. And just even the 30 minutes that you are on the address to the African nation that people can watch every Wednesday afternoon at 3:00 Eastern time from the Chairman Omali Yeshitela Facebook page. And then of course, every Sunday, 2 hours of very deep political study led by the chairman, and has been led by the chairman for many years now, 8 a.m. Eastern, from the same Chairman Omali Yeshitela page, and from the Burning Spear, I believe. Every Sunday, just the depth of these ideas and how, just they are liberating. These ideas are liberating because they take you and force you to be active, to be organized, to be under the leadership of this revolution. We have a place in it. We have an assignment in it. But Chairman, talk about the party and the growth of the party in this period.
I just want to say, Carmen Penny, I think it's important what you have said. because African internationalism and anti-colonial politics, it liberates white people also, because it allows white people to join in the fray without having to be on this whole anti-racist kick trip that requires such a subjective, it provides such a subjective kind of beating of white people, revolving mostly around inane and meaningless stuff. You know, I was reading something that was written by a white guy who's supposed to be our friend, and he was talking about the path he has taken, becoming the good white guy that he is, and that how one time, you know, he had to really discover that he had racist ideas about Black people too, and it wasn't just all these other people, but he had these ideas in his head as well. And so he's going to make amends for that in certain ways, but he knows that they're there, and he's going to help the Black community, Black people. He recognized whites as settler colonialists. I thought that was really deep and important. But the thing is that this whole notion that what you think, you know, because you don't like Black people, or you don't like what the food Black people eat, or you don't like this or that, that muddies up the whole water. Because the truth of the matter is many of us, and perhaps most, don't give a damn about whether we are liked or not. And you need to be liberated from this self-centered kind of narcissistic place, you know, in the universe, and that's the only way you can become free. You don't have to. You don't have to like. I don't care if you got bad ideas in your brain. What I care about is whether or not you unite with the struggle against colonialism, which can also rescue you. And even this ability to engage in the struggle does not require some kind of self-flagellation, you know, of any sort. You know, you don't have to do that. You recognize the contradiction, you recognize you benefited from, you recognize that it's colonialism, and you take a stand based on that. So it doesn't require, you know, any kind of purging of meaningless stuff. And the party is growing in some ways. On the one hand, you know, like we have, you mentioned we have this plenary coming up, but we have developed this regional strategy worldwide for the work to build the party. And over the years, we worked for many years to build the African Socialist International.
Yes.
In fact, the first meeting of the African Socialist International happened in 1982, the day after the World Tribunal on Reparations. There was a meeting of Africans from various places where we, you know, tried to initiate that process. But you know, with Comrade Louisa Kinshasa, who is the Secretary General of the African Socialist International, who's from Congo, and he lives in England now, and he has been incessant, you know, like organizing, particularly in Europe, and to build the African Socialist International. And then he played this major role in getting the African People's Socialist Party established in South Africa, which was tremendous, has been consequential. We already had a presence in places like Sierra Leone and Ghana, a limited kind of presence, but we were there. And then with the consolidation of the party and our movement in South Africa, we have this incredible, enthusiastic, passionate African internationalists, young African internationalists. And they have assumed the responsibility for leading our work in South Africa and also leading our work throughout Africa. Comrade Tafari Mugeri is the director of organization for all of Africa. So now we're not just in South Africa, we're not just in Sierra Leone, we're not just in Ghana, we're in Uganda, we're in Nigeria, we're in Chad, we're in Ivory Coast, I think we're in Mali. I mean, and it's something that's, growing on a regular basis. Then of course we're in Guadeloupe, in the Caribbean, we're in Bermuda in the Caribbean, and we've been in the Bahamas for a long time now, and we're growing. And there are ebbs and flows in terms of how this thing works, but we're there now. And so we may have more or less people at any given time, but we're there and we're growing. African internationalism is the explanation that people have been waiting for. And we've always said that African internationalism is a theory of practice. That's why we came out of the gate and built the Tribunal on Reparations, built an organization that revolved simply around reparations. We've never just put stuff out in some kind of abstract way like that. And that's why we were so excited in 2014 when this rebellion happened in St. Louis. And the slogan that was coming from the people there. Usually they have succeeded in flying in Sharpton or Jesse Jackson or other forces like that to divert the people's struggle and bring a lawyer in who would get some money for a victim, et cetera, and that's it. But this time the young people, well, people in that working class community, they rose up and seriously rose up, and they sent in military forces and everything they could to quash it. And ultimately they hijacked that movement and gave it this characterization of Black Lives Matter movement, but that's not what those people were saying. After 18-year-old Mike Brown's body lay 4.5 years and 4.5 hours in 100-degree plus asphalt weather, they were saying kill the police. That's what they were saying, and that was before Sharpton got in and Jackson got in and all of the people who would have us support the system and fight against racism. And so we were there, and we organized on the ground there, and that was August of 2014. Me and one other person, and then we brought in a few other persons, and then finally the deputy chair went in, and what was supposed to be a week after we had built the organization there, and where she was going to get an office for the organization, and we ended up, she ended up there for more than a year, almost 2 years, and we built the Black Power Blueprint project there. So we have occupied space there. We've transformed an entire African community, and the growth is unlimited. The growth possibility is unlimited. So we've seen movement by the government or sectors of the government, particularly neo-colonial forces in the wards where we're doing the work to try to stop it, to keep it from happening, partially because they're in the pockets of what do they call these people who, developers, looters of the community, and partially because every success that we have in changing and uplifting that community and the people in the community makes a statement about their ineffectiveness and their uselessness. And so their defense too, that there's self-defense for them to crush it, to make it unsuccessful, to do what they can to slander it and other things like that. In fact, I don't know if it's appropriate to say this, but they've gone so far as to forge your name on some document, claiming that either you owned or you were the one. I'm talking about you, Comrade Penny Hess, the leader of this economic work, which is obviously being done by Deputy Chair Omali Yeshitela. If you don't believe it, ask anybody who works in that process. Yeah. So that we want to do the work, want to change life, want to change the circumstance, want to create. We want to negate the significance of colonialism by replacing it with liberation and independence. And that's what we're doing, you know, Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, this has been so powerful. Thank you so much for everything. I'm just looking forward to the next time that we can, you know, discuss these questions with you. And just thank you so much for tonight and for being on with the African People's Solidarity Committee study. This has been brilliant. And as always, very, very amazing discussion. And, you know, I just we're gonna open it up. We're gonna have a few questions here in a little bit. So please stay on, but I'm gonna turn it back over to Comrade Ali Ayello.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Chairman. That was incredible. That was really, really brilliant. It was a profound discussion, and also really appreciate and salute Chairwoman Penny Hess. Yeah, that was absolutely incredible, and just, you know, to hear that analysis of, you know, the history of struggle and building APSC, and then up to now, in the way that the party is leading and building and just transforming, and the way that African internationalism is gripping the masses of people is incredibly profound. And I really, really salute your leadership, Chairman. And yeah, I know everyone on this discussion feels the same way as well. So Uhuru. And now I would like to bring up the chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Jesse Neville, to talk about how you can join the African People's Solidarity Committee. Uhuru.
Uhuru, reparations now. Uhuru, thank you so much, Ali. And wow, I want to join in a round of applause for Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Chairwoman Penny Hess. That was amazing. That was such a great study, such a great discussion, and such an honor to have the chairman, the leader of the African Revolution, on with us. So thank you so much, Chairman, for that. That was amazing and so inspiring. And I am sure that everybody who's watching this study is very clear from the level of discussion that we've had tonight that this is not something that's just designed to, you know, be a information consumption kind of thing and make it better for us to beat debates on Facebook or something like that. This is a call to arms. This is a call to action to us in the white community. And that call is to join the African People's Solidarity Committee. So I want to talk to you about how you can do that tonight. Right now, you can join the African People's Solidarity Committee. The door is open for you to walk through and begin this incredible process, this life-changing, thrilling, beautiful process of becoming one with the struggling peoples of the world that are fighting for liberation and self-determination. And I want to just salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela for the vision and the strategic genius and the dedication for building this front of the African Revolution behind enemy lines, bringing Black power into the colonizer nation population. And I want to salute Chairwoman Penny Hess for exemplifying that, for showing what that looks like, what that sounds like, for 44 years of courageous leadership of the African People's Solidarity Committee. And I want to salute Deputy Chair Onazane Yeshitela, the powerhouse leader of so much work throughout the African People's Socialist Party, including much of the work that we as members of APSC have the honor to participate in under the leadership of Deputy Chair. So these are the incredible revolutionaries that you have the honor of working under their leadership when you join the African People's Solidarity Committee. The way you can do that is by going to apscuhuru.org/join. That's apscuhuru.org/join. And go ahead and fill out that form and get the process started. This is how we can be part of changing this world in this critical moment in history when oppressed and colonized African people are rising up White people are being mobilized by the resistance of African people. The African Revolution is winning. Imperialism is dying. Chairman Omali Yeshitela has said it over and over and over again. This is the period revolution can and will become the main trend in the world once again, and we can be a part of it. The future does not have to be the grim, dreary, depressing, hopeless worldview of white power imperialism. It can be the bright revolutionary promise of socialism and the ability for all human beings to live and have food, clothes, and shelter, and have wealth and splendor with nobody living at the expense of anybody else. That is the African future. That is the African internationalist world that is being constructed brick by brick right now. So I just want to unite with what the chairman said, that if you hate the oppression of women, if you hate the oppression of people based on gender or sexuality, if you hate the oppression of people based on ability, physical or other kinds of abilities, if you hate anything about this society, what you hate is a system that has its foundation in the oppression of African people. And we can break free from our relationship to this system. We can break free from this horrible reality where everything we want requires, the ability for our families to have food, requires bombs dropped on children in Afghanistan. We don't want to be a part of that world. We don't want to be a part of that relationship, and we can break free from it and join humanity and join the rest of the world. We can rectify our relationship to African people and transform it from a relationship built on oppression into a relationship of solidarity and reparations. And this is our class struggle. This is our fight. This is our future. So go to apscuhuru.org/join, fill out that form, and guess what? I guarantee you, if you fill out that form, you will get a phone call within 24 hours. An actual human being will call you to talk to you about the next steps in coming into this organization. It's very organized. You come in, you get a sponsor, somebody to walk you through a 6-month process where you study political education, you study the writings of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, you learn how to organize, you learn how to be a revolutionary the only way that white people can, under the leadership of the vanguard party of the African Revolution. And I just want to close by saying, I joined this organization about 10 years ago after being a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement for about a year. And joining APSC was the most meaningful decision I ever made. I have never looked back, and I have never had a boring day in the decade that I've been a member. Every day is thrilling. Every day is exhilarating. Every day in the struggle in the trenches is a day closer to victory for the African Revolution and for the oppressed and colonized peoples of the world. So join the African People's Solidarity Committee, get on the winning team, join under the leadership of the African Revolution, and fight for reparations now. apscuhuru.org/join. Join the African People's Solidarity Committee. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Jesse. That was a great call to join. I totally unite. This was the best decision I ever made too. Definitely right. No day is a boring day, and it's an exciting time to be a revolutionary, and it's an incredibly bright future that is ahead. Just being part of this organization. So I really want to unite to go to apscuhuru.org/join. This is the movement to be a part of. So now we are going to go into our question and answer section. And we have a bunch of questions that came in, but if you haven't gotten a chance to ask your question yet, you can do that by going into the Facebook or YouTube comment section and leaving your question there, typing your question in there, or if you're watching on Zoom, you can put it into the Q&A feature on Zoom. And before we go into questions, I just want to say where some of our viewers are located from. So we have people viewing in Huntsville, Alabama, in Wichita, Kansas, Los Angeles, California, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, St. Petersburg, Florida, Spokane, Washington, Gainesville, Florida, Louisville, Kentucky, St. Louis, Missouri, San Diego, California, Seattle, Washington, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. So shout out to all of our comrades that are tuning in from those locations. And so the first question that I have is from Sobek, who is in Los Angeles, California, and he's tuning in on YouTube. And he says, my question is, as a North American, what would be the motivation for North Americans to struggle for African liberation?
Uhuru Sobek, and thank you for that question. And I think that that is very pertinent to what we have been discussing, that it is in the interest of white people to be struggling for African liberation. First of all, the party formed APSC out of a strategy to extend the African revolution into the belly of the beast, into the white population. And our job, our assignment is reparations, is winning the white population to turn loose their whiteness, to jump off that pedestal and stand in solidarity with the rest of the world and return the stolen resources. And as the chairman has said, this is the class struggle for white people. And this is the way we are anti-imperialist. And as the chairman has laid out and has been said, every issue, every contradiction that we see in the world, that we hate, that we despise, every form of oppression goes back to the central contradiction in the world, which is parasitic capitalism and the assault on Africa and the colonization of African people and oppressed and colonized peoples all over the planet, and that all white people sit on this pedestal. So the only way that we can be revolutionary is under the leadership of the African working class. And, you know, I just really appreciate that question. I think that it is something that we have to, you know, we have to fight to articulate better and better and better to other white people. But Chairman, do you have anything that you wanted to say on that? I see you looking up.
I was looking up only because, I mean, I unite with what you've just said. And I started off earlier talking about how this question of white people is so mysterious. You know, white people are mysterious. Most peoples around the world had never experienced anything like white people. And I'm talking about all of the grotesque brutality and everything else that we've experienced. So who are white people? And based on this experience that we've had, Africans, many Africans have flipped the script and have defined white people as a sort of the mirror image of how whites have defined Africans. And so, you know, there's something bestial and extremely problematic about white people. And white people are mysterious, as I said before. But I think that what we are doing is, you know, we bring an African internationalist worldview. We bring in this science of investigation and analysis, and we learn that fundamental to human existence is a society that revolves around creating life and recreating life. And everybody, all societies have to do that. You don't exist if you don't do that. And what has happened is that for a while now, white people through slavery and colonialism have existed, and you know, life was created in this relationship, and that's the thing that informs like how white people act and do. I mean, it's killing indigenous people and taking their land. It's war in Africa for the resources and what have you. This became the way that this whole economy and the life of Europe relied on that. And that created the ideas and attitudes in the heads of white people, because that happens. A social system, the ideas in the social system really reflects the means by which that society achieves what it needs to exist. And so anyway, I just think that's part of what was really important about the advent, the creation of African People Solidarity Committee. I think we knocked down we hammered away. It hasn't been completely destroyed. But I think we brought science into this discussion, and I think that APSC and those of you who have joined it and become a part of it. I mean, Jesse, Jesse is a new guy. He's only been around for 10 years. But I think that you are that material living manifestation. We said, you know, African nationalism is a theory of practice, and you know, you can tell what we believe by what we do, and APSC is an example of that. You know, so yeah.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. And I don't know if we have time for all our questions. We might have to go through this. I know we need to wrap up soon, but I was wondering if you could read the comment from Undersecretary of Unión del Barrio, Benjamin Prado, or should I? Okay, so he says that Benjamin Prado says, Uhuru comrades, long live African internationalism and the liberation struggle for all African people worldwide. Uhuru. And,
see, the thing is that African internationalism, as quiet as it's kept, the thing that makes it groundbreaking and really important is it's taken theory out of the hands of the colonizer, of the imperialists, of Europe. It has liberated theory. And it gives us and everybody an ability to make an analysis that is not centered on some assumption that came out of Europe, whose worldview is informed, shaped by the fact that they live at the expense of everybody else. I mean, I've commented, as you know, at different times about how Karl Marx, as he's writing Capital, explaining the basis of class exploitation in the world. He's using resources that come from Frederick Engels' daddy, who himself was a capitalist and who made much of his money in textile and cotton that was picked by African people. So here's a guy writing about exploitation and deciding that the central question was not the African who picked the cotton that gave him the ability to do the book, but the white working class who benefited from the cotton being picked and that kind of thing. So, and the point that I want to make is that I believe what has been important is that we say African internationalism. I think that we are talking about also internationalism that speaks from the specific reality experiences from other peoples as well, including Mexican people and indigenous people, you know, what have you. Because there's no such thing as a real theory and philosophy that exists in some kind of vacuum. You can't talk about the African liberation without talking about the world, without talking about its relationship to Europe and all the other peoples. And I think that Mexicans, I think that Arabs and other peoples around the world can see themselves through utilization of the same you know, method of investigation and analysis, starting from the same premise as we have been able to do. So thank you, compañero Benjamin, for your comments.
Uhuru, and you know, there's other questions, but I'm going to leave it there. And I would just say that people can always have all questions answered on the Sunday morning study from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern time. Every Sunday, Chairman Omali Yeshitela is there with incredible political education. Chairman Omali Yeshitela's page and also on the Burning Spear YouTube channel. So please tune into that. And I want to turn it back over to Ahmed Ali, and I want to thank you so much, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And do you have any last words that you want to give us tonight?
Well, kind of self-criticism. I mean, we talk so much about science and stuff like that, and I'm sure everybody who's been participating in this process up to now have experienced how primitive my situation, my setup here is. I mean, you know, the loss of power for a while, which is entirely my fault because of how I got my charger hooked up and the lighting. You know, I'm looking, I can hardly see myself. So I know others of you must be having a similar experience. And so I'm self-critical about that. And I'll try to be set up a little bit better next time around.
Chairman, it was magnificent having you on, and always is. And, you know, just really, really appreciate this discussion and just how profound it is. And also that, you know, where would the world be today without the struggles that you have made and led for your entire life, basically, and that this has changed the world. This has defined the world that we live in today and what the future is going to be. And it's an incredible honor to be under your leadership and to experience history being made every single day, and watching the African Revolution unfold in such a brilliant and incredible way under the leadership of the African working class. So uhuru, and thank you again, Chairman. And just want to say unity through reparations, and vanguard up.
Vanguard up, comrades. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Yes, I just really want to join in saluting you, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, for being on this study. Made it an incredibly dynamic discussion, and just really appreciate the theory and having this space to be able to organize. It's incredible to be a part of this movement. So thank you for being on this discussion, and also really want to salute Chairwoman Penny Hess. Really, it was incredibly dynamic. So I just really want to appreciate that. And some final announcements before we close out. So this is announcements to everyone about our upcoming events and things like that. Members of the African People's Socialist Party and Uhuru movement from throughout the world will convene this at the second plenary of the party's 7th Congress on February 6th through 9th, 2021. The plenary will be held as a virtual event with the theme African Workers of the World, Unite and Organize. This event is open to members of the Solidarity Movement, and you can register at APSCplenary.org. And then on Thursday, December 31st at 7 p.m. Eastern, celebrate New Year's Eve by attending Cheers to a Dying Imperialism, a review of 2020 and the way forward for the African People's Socialist Party. And that will be featuring Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And for more information, you can go to African People's Socialist Party. You can go to facebook.com/African People's Socialist Party USA. And every Sunday, which Penny had mentioned, every Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern, you can tune into #Omali Taught Me live from the chairman's Facebook page and Burning Spear TV YouTube channel. And you can find details about these and more upcoming events at theburningspear.com/events. And make sure to visit uhurusolidarity.org and apscuhuru.org to learn more about the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, African People's Solidarity Committee, and how you can become a member and join the work to build white solidarity with Black power and unity through reparations. So thank you so much, Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Chairwoman Penny Hess. And that concludes today's event, and we will see you at the next event. Uhuru.